Welcome back to Pop Flashback. I'm your host, Rick Smalls, and with me, as always, the amazing Tina Boucher.
It's great to be back.
Today, we're taking a look at product placement in movies.
Oh, yeah, everyone sees it, but how long has this been going on?
That's what we're going to find out.
Exactly. We're going to go all the way back to the silent era.
Oh, wow, the silent era. That's going way back.
Like the 1920s,
Wow.
with a film called The Garage.
The Garage?
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
Well, it stars Buster Keaton and Fatty Arbuckle,
Okay, I know those guys.
and it features what's considered one of the first instances of product placement.
Oh, really?
The Red Crown gasoline logo is everywhere. And get this, people were already complaining about it back then.
No way.
Yeah, newspapers at the time criticized the film for its brazen advertising.
Raisin advertising. That's hilarious.
I know, right? So even back then, people were sensitive to this kind of thing.
It makes you wonder, was it even a paid placement?
That's the mystery. There's no clear consensus on whether Red Crown actually paid to be in the film.
Interesting.
So maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe it was an early example of a brand trying to sneak their product into a movie.
Either way, it's a pretty cool piece of history.
Absolutely. And it shows that product placement has been around for a lot longer than most people realize.
Yeah, I guess you don't really think about silent films having ads in them, but it makes sense.
Oh, yeah. They were just as eager to reach audiences as modern filmmakers are.
So was Red Crown the only one doing this back then?
Not at all. You see brands like Lux Soap and Budweiser popping up in films from the same era.
So it was already a trend.
It was starting to become one, for sure.
I guess when something works, people tend to copy it.
That's how these things usually go. And when it comes to successful product placement, you can't talk about it without mentioning James Bond.
Oh yeah, James Bond and his gadgets.
Exactly. The Aston Martin DB5. It's like the ultimate example of a product placement that became synonymous with the character.
Yeah, you see that silver Aston Martin and you immediately think of Bond.
It's not just a car. It's the Bond car.
But it's funny, they didn't always use Aston Martins.
You're right. They switched to BMW for a while in the 90s.
Yeah, and then they went back to Aston Martin.
It just goes to show that even the most iconic product placements can change over time.
I guess brands are always trying to stay relevant and reach new audiences.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means shaking things up a bit, even if it means messing with a beloved formula.
But in the end, the Aston Martin is just so tied to the Bond image that it makes sense to go back to it.
It's like they tried something different, but they realized that the classic was still the best.
And what about the audience? Did people mind the switch to BMW?
It was mixed. Some people loved it, some people hated it.
I bet the purists weren't happy.
Oh, definitely. But there are also plenty of people who were open to the change, especially if the new car still fit that image of sophistication and performance that Bond is known for.
I can see that.
It's all about finding that balance between staying true to the character and appealing to a modern audience.
Speaking of shaking things up, there was that whole Heineken thing in Skyfall.
Oh, yeah. Bond swapping his martini for a beer. That was a big deal.
Some people called it sacrilege.
I know, right? But Heineken paid a ton of money for that placement, like $45 million.
Seriously, $45 million for Bond to drink a beer.
It just shows how much brands are willing to spend to get their products in front of a global audience.
But did it work? Did people suddenly start drinking Heineken because James Bond did?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's hard to say for sure.
I mean, you can't really track if someone saw Bond drink a Heineken and then went out and bought one.
Exactly. It's all about brand awareness and creating a positive association with the product.
So maybe it didn't directly boost sales, but it definitely got people talking about Heineken.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge marketing coup.
But sometimes these product placements can backfire.
Oh, yeah. You go too far and it just becomes ridiculous.
Like in Die Another Day.
Oh, God, Die Another Day. That was a product placement overload.
It was so bad that people called it Buy Another Day.
I know, right? It
Yeah.
was like they just crammed as many products into the film as they could.
And it totally took you out of the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When it's that blatant, it just feels like you're watching a commercial. It's a reminder that product placement needs to be done tastefully and with some subtlety.
It has to feel natural, like it's part of the story.
Exactly. Otherwise, it just becomes distracting and annoying.
So it's a delicate balance.
It definitely is.
But when it's done right, it can be really effective.
Absolutely. Like in E.T. with the Reese's Pieces.
Oh yeah, that's a classic example.
It was subtle, it fit the story, and it created this iconic association between the product and the film.
And it's funny because Spielberg originally wanted to use M&Ms.
Really?
Yeah, but Mars, the company that makes M&Ms, turned him down.
Wow, talk about a missed opportunity.
Seriously. They could have been a part of movie history.
And Hershey's the company that makes Reese's Pieces. They hit the jackpot.
Their sales went through the roof.
It just goes to show that sometimes the right product placement can make all the difference.
Okay, we've talked a lot about product placement, but I think it's time for a break.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back with more Pop Flashback. Hangry.
Hangry. Totally. And we're looking at their online shop today, and it's pretty wild. Got like everything you could think of, from t-shirts and sweatshirts to candles and stickers, and they've got, all this stuff with this really fun, like, food-themed kind of spin on it.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they've taken, what's a pretty negative emotion and spun it to be something.
To be something good.
Yeah, like something relatable and fun. Welcome back.
Now, before the break, we were talking about how product placement can be a win-win for everyone.
Right, for the filmmakers and for the brands.
But let's be real, not every product placement is a success story.
Oh, definitely. There are some major fails out there.
Big time. Like Transformers: Age of Extinction.
Oh my God, yes.
That was product placement overload.
Well, it was like they were trying to see how many brands they could cram into one movie.
You practically needed a scorecard to keep track.
And what's crazy?
What?
They actually got sued because some of the promised placements were missing from the final cut.
No way.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
That's insane.
Like, these companies paid big bucks to have their products in the film, and then they weren't even there.
Talk about a legal nightmare.
It's a good reminder that even with all the money involved, things can go wrong.
Yeah, and it shows how important it is to find that balance between showcasing the products and not overwhelming the audience.
Right. You don't want to take people out of the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has to feel natural.
Like it's organically part of the world of the film.
And sometimes the best placements are the ones you don't even notice right away.
Like in Castaway with the Wilson volleyball.
Oh, yeah. Well, also,
Wilson? It was such a clever move by Wilson Sporting Goods.
it was. I mean, the volleyball becomes like Tom Hanks's best friend
Right. And it creates this emotional connection with the audience.
without feeling like a blatant ad.
Exactly. It's just this subtle presence that adds to the story.
Speaking of doing it right, we have to talk about Morgan Spurlock's The Greatest Movie Ever Sold.
Oh, yeah. That movie was brilliant.
I mean, the whole thing was funded by product placement.
And he filmed the whole process.
It was fascinating to see how those deals came together.
And how much money was involved.
It really gives you a behind-the-scenes look at the world of product placement.
And how it influences filmmaking.
It's a complex relationship for sure.
Definitely.
And with the rise of streaming services, it's even more complicated now.
Right, because there are no traditional ad breaks on Netflix or Amazon Prime.
So how do brands reach audiences on those platforms?
That's the big question.
They have to find new and creative ways to integrate their products.
And some shows have done a really good job of it.
Like Stranger Things with the Eggo waffles.
Yes. It was a subtle nod to the 80s setting.
And it actually led to a surge in Eggo sales.
Which proves that product placement can still work in the streaming era.
As long as it's done well.
Exactly.
And it's not just movies and TV shows anymore.
Right. Social media influencers are huge now.
They're basically walking billboards.
In a way, yes. But the good ones make it feel authentic.
It's all about finding the right influencer for your brand.
Someone who genuinely likes your product.
And whose audience aligns with your target market.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the good and the bad of product placement.
The hits and the misses.
But the big question is, does it actually work?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It's hard to say for sure.
There's no guaranteed formula for success.
It depends on so many factors.
The product, the film, the audience.
And how the placement is executed.
Exactly.
It's like that old saying about advertising.
Half the money I spend is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half.
Exactly. You could pour millions into product placement and still not see a return.
But you can also hit a home run and have your product become a cultural phenomenon.
It's a gamble.
It is.
But at the end of the day, product placement is here to stay.
It's crazy to think how much product placement has changed from those early days with like the Red Crown gasoline to like everything we see today.
It really is. It's become so sophisticated.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how all this affects us, the viewers.
Right. Are we just pawns in some big marketing game?
I mean, we see so much of it now, it's easy to just tune it out.
Yeah. But do you think we're more susceptible to these messages than we realize?
It's possible, right? Like our brains are wired to make connections.
Exactly. So if we see a product associated with something we enjoy, like a cool movie,
it could create a positive feeling towards that product.
even if we don't consciously realize it.
So even if we think we're immune to advertising,
We might still be influenced by all these placements. Yeah, we should all be critical thinkers and ask ourselves, why is this product being featured?
exactly, what message are they trying to send?
And does it align with my own values?
It's like a constant battle between marketers and consumers.
They're trying to get into our heads.
And we're trying to stay one step ahead.
It's a wild world.
It is, but it's also fascinating.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We've seen how product placement has evolved
From those early silent films,
to the sophisticated strategies we see today.
we've talked about the good, the bad.
And the ugly.
But ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide how we feel about it
To be aware of it
and to make informed choices.
as consumers.
So before we go, we want to hear from you.
What's the most memorable product placement you've ever seen?
Did it make you want to buy the product?
Or did it just make you roll your eyes?
Head over to the comments and let us know.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll catch you next time on Pop Flashback.